guys. So today what we're going to do is continue our lesson on radicals. Last week we talked about simplifying radicals, we were adding and subtracting radicals, and we started multiplying radicals before we left. So this week we're going to be talking about distributive property with radicals. And it's exactly as it sounds. We know what the distributive property is. We multiply things together. So let's take a look at what we have. I decided to break this down into 3 easy steps for you guys, and I wrote it down here in front of you. So the first step, as you guys can see, is just to distribute. Right here, step 1. And distribute means to multiply, right? Distribute means to multiply. How do we multiply? Remember, we multiply the outside numbers together, and we multiply the inside numbers together. So outsides with outsides, insides with insides, I like to say. After you distribute, you want to look to simplify any radicals that you can, right? Look for any perfect square root numbers to divide with. So what are those perfect square root numbers? Don't forget the perfect square root numbers. If we were in my room, I would say turn and look at the back wall. Square root of 1, which really doesn't help, but the most common one, square root of 4, square root of 9, square root of 16, 25. Those are probably the most common ones that you're going to see. Occasionally 36 and 49. But these ones right here, you want to always look for 4, 9, 16, 25. You'll see those pop up the most. Okay? So distribute and multiply. You're going to simplify any radicals. And then the last thing you want to do is you want to look to add any like radicals. All right? Any like terms, go ahead and combine like terms together. Remember, when we're adding radicals, you can only add the coefficients. The inside of the radical stays the same. So distribute, simplify, add. All right, here we go. Let's take a look at our first example. I've got 4 examples for you today. So let's take a look at our first one. So we're asked to simplify. And as you can see here, I have square root of 5 times 4 minus the square root of 20. Now I know here I am going to distribute, right? How do I know that I'm distributing? Because I see 2 terms inside the parentheses. Right, 2 terms. And remember, terms are separated by a plus minus sign. I've got 4 here, and I've got the square root of 20. So I know I have 2 terms here to distribute. Actually, before I do this problem, I want to show you when you should not distribute. And we'll put this off to the side here. If let's say the problem looked like this, okay, that's not 2 terms inside this parentheses. That's only a 1 term. That's 4 times the square root of 20. There's no plus or minus sign in between that 4 or 20. So you know this is not going to be distributive property. This one would just be a multiplication, not distributive property, okay? So do not distribute something like this. But if you look over here with a plus minus sign in between, you know you're going to be distributing that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's do my multiplication. I'm going to take the radical of 5 times 4. Remember, insides with insides, outsides with outsides. In this case, 4, we have a 4 on the outside and a 5 on the inside. And there we go, 4 times the square root of 5. All right, then I'm going to multiply the square root of 5 times square root of 20. That's 5 times 20 is 100. So let's see, I'm going to write this down, bring my negative sign down. 5 times the square root of 20, here I'll even write it out. That's really 100. All right, and I'm going to bring stuff down. Just showing my work here. All right, after I'm done distributing, we're going to, remember our second step is to simplify. All right, if I simplify, I'm looking inside the radicals, inside the square roots. Do we have anything to simplify? Looking at this first term, see the 5? That's not something that I can divide. That's not anything that I can simplify. It's not a perfect square. So that first term, there's nothing to simplify. But the second term right here, it's square root of 100. 100 is a perfect square. 100, when I simplify this, actually just becomes 10 with no square root, right? The square root of 100 is 10. So I'm going to go ahead and bring down this, bring down my minus sign, and there we go. Actually, I'm done simplifying. Remember, the last step was to add any like terms. Well, there are no like terms this has a radical 5, and the 10 has no radical, so there's no like terms to add, and so this is it. 4 radical 5 minus 10. Now you could write it like this. You could put the negative 10 out front and say plus 4 radical 5. That would be the same thing. It just depends on how you want to rearrange the numbers, but honestly, it makes no difference to me. Okay? All right, let's take a look at example number 2. I'm going to slide over here. Here's another problem. I see that we've got this one term out here, 2 radical 3, and I'm going to be multiplying it to 2 terms, this square root of 6 and 3 square root of 12. Again, I see there's a plus sign here, so that means there's 2 separate terms, and that's why this is not just multiplication, this is distributive property. Right? I need to distribute because there are 2 things that I'm going to multiply to. So I'm going to start off by multiplying the first term. So I have 2 radical 3 times the radical 6. And again, we multiply insides together and outsides together. I'll start with the outside. I've got 2 times 1, right? That's an invisible 1 there. So that's really just 2 on the outside. On the inside, we're multiplying 3 times 6. So really, this is 2 radical 18. Okay, I'm done there. I'm going to distribute. I'm going to multiply to my next term. And I'm going to show all my work here. On the outside, right, I have a 2 here. This is the 2 and the 3. So I'm just going to show my work. I'm going to write that down. I'm multiplying 2 times 3. But on the inside, I see I have a 3 and a 12. So we're going to be multiplying those 2 things together, 3 and 12. So that's 6 radical 36. So there we go. I've finished my distributive property. Next thing I want to do is I want to look to see if I can simplify anything, right? So again, we're looking inside the square roots, inside the radicals, to see if we can break this apart. I'll look at the first one here. I have radical 18, and I can split that. That's going to split into radical 9 and radical 2. And this 2 hanging out front, I'm going to bring it down. Don't forget about those numbers in front. We're multiplying that, right? So it's 2 times radical 9 times radical 2. Again, I can simplify this square root of 9. The square root of 9 is going to become a 3 with no radical. So I'm going to move my 2 down and my radical 2 down. And all together, this is 6 radical 2. 6 times the square root of 2. All right, moving on to this other term here, I see a square root of 36. Well, that's just 6. Don't forget you had this 6 out front. I can't ever forget any of these numbers. 6 times 6 is 36. So altogether, I have a positive 36. And there we go. Is there anything for me to add, right? So the last step was to look at this. And can I add any like terms? Again, no. Here I have radical 2, and there's no radical here. These are not like terms. I cannot add them. So this is it. And again, you might see somebody write the 36 out front, right? You might see 36 plus 6 square root of 2 as an option. They both mean the same thing. And there you go.